Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm being weird, but that's okay because you're here anyway, right? Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Miss Mini Life. Today I'm going to be building the second building in this series where I'm making an entire town completely from scratch in scale, which is so tiny. Let me show you guys an example. See this? This is context. This is so small. In our last video, we built a construction site to show where the town was going to be located, and it's in the middle of a forest. Since we have a natural resource at our disposal, I figured the first town building that we should do is a lumber mill. It just made sense, you know. Lumber, we've got lumber right there. I'm making the lore up for this town and the history as I go along. So my backstory for this build is that this is a mom and pop sawmill operation, and it's just a little family over here getting the logs, processing them, getting them all cut down, doing some wholesale, and they're also selling to just everybody in town. They basically supply a lot of wood to our small community that we're building here, and I love them. They're fictitious, but I love them. They're so cute. They don't exist. Anyway. This series is allowing me to try out some techniques I've never used before, and I'm really excited to show you guys this build, so let's just, do that. Paying attention to the scale is really important to me when I build these dioramas, but this scale in particular is so dang tiny that I'm trying a little hack to help me actually visualize how small this thing should be. I pulled up the product specifications on my phone and took a picture, and then I scaled that down to the size that it would be on my scale ruler that I printed out, and I just got this online for free, and that helped me to actually get some measurements down on paper because trying to do it in my head was just going to be way too hard. This piece of equipment that I'm starting with is the centerpiece for the entire mill, and this is the Wood-Mizer sawmill that is based on the LT15, if anyone is interested for some reason in that. And this machine is responsible for taking these giant, freshly cut logs of wood from the trees that we have and sawing it down into usable sheets of wood. I'm using a 0.5 millimeter thick sheet of polystyrene plastic, and I'm gluing it / melting it together with some plastic cement and sanding it with a homemade sanding stick. Starting with a sawmill for the town's first building made sense to me because we have so many trees as a natural resource in this fictitious world that we built. Why not start taking advantage of it? One of the things that I really love about building dioramas is that it gives me an excuse to do research and learn new things about a part of the world that I usually wouldn't think about. Like, I never really considered how the 2x4s or any of the lumber in the local Home Depot got there, or how the tree became different lengths of wood, and it's really interesting to start to take a closer look at how the world around us actually works. And it gives me a chance to see that this is actually someone's job out there and what life looks like for them, and just get a different perspective. Look how little it is! Isn't it so cute and tiny? Now I'm going to use the sawmill to be the scale guide for everything else in the build so I don't have to keep measuring each little thing. I'm going to build a simple shed to go around the sawmill. I made a rough pattern of what the shed's going to look like, and I'm using 1/16 of an inch thick basswood to cut a few tiny strips that's going to be for the frame of the shed. I'm gluing the frame together over the pattern that I made, and I'm using a drop of wood glue on each of the joints. It is going to stick to the paper, but because it's so little, it shouldn't be too bad when I try to peel this thing up. I suddenly realized that I don't have any real wood sheets that are thin enough to be the panels for the side of this shed, so I'm going to use 1-ply chipboard and make really tiny strips of it to be the siding. Not gonna lie, this step took forever, and I was kind of going into a trance-like state by the end of it, but I really like how it looks as the finished result. Here's how much paper got stuck to the back of the wood when I peeled it up. It was only a little bit, but still something to consider. I actually decided to just leave it and not even peel it off because I was kind of done with this step at that point. I added a few beams to the inside panels, and I moved on to making the roof. I used more of the sheet of plastic that I used earlier to build the sawmill and just made tiny strips and glued them down. I want to paint everything all at once, so I'm going to put the shed to the side. And now I'm going to use pretty much all of the exact same techniques that I used to build the sawmill at the beginning of the video, but I'm going to make a tiny forklift because we have to have some kind of way to move around all of these logs. With the forklift, I tried building it in layers and making it fatter by just stacking pieces of plastic one on top of the other for each little part of the forklift that I saw in the image. And I think that actually worked out pretty well, but I don't think I made it thick enough, so it's a little bit wonky, but it still gets the message across. I made the tires out of some plastic tube that I cut into small pieces, and I added some treads to the tracks of the larger tires, and I think in this case these are actually tires, but thank you to everybody who let me know that in the last video the wheels that I was referring to on the excavator were called tracks. And now I can airbrush all of my plastic pieces at one time and then let them dry. I'm painting the wood siding of the shed by hand because I wanted to have a little bit more control, and I also think it's starting out with an already wood-like foundation with the brown chipboard, so I didn't really want to cover that up. Even though I'm making each building in the town loosely in order of when they were established, the buildings themselves are going to be a bit older. So I'm aging the wood a little bit, and I'm going to be aging the roof panels to show that this is not a newly built structure in the town. It seemed like while I was doing this step, I kept finding little corners that didn't have any paint on them and having to go back and paint little crevices. But I finally got it painted, and then I glued it together with some super glue. Now we can't make any lumber here without some logs, so I'm going to be making logs out of these toothpicks, and I was a little bit worried that they were going to stay too toothpicky and not really end up looking like logs, so I wanted to rough them up. I felt like they were just too smooth and too round, even though a lot of the logs from far away do just look very uniform and straight. I scuffed it up with a wood file and went over it with a light coat of brown paint. Okay, so now I have all of the pieces that I want to include in my diorama scene, and I need to make the base. I'm using a piece of pink insulation foam that's about an inch thick, and I cut it into a rectangle, and now I'm roughing up the surface of it with the same wood file, and then I'm mixing up some paint. These are various brands of brown and black acrylic paint that I'm mixing together to be the first layer of the terrain. I'm smoothing a coat of paint over the entire top layer of the rectangle, and then I had the idea of mixing in some wood glue because I wanted to add in some sawdust and see what effect that would have. This was sort of an impromptu experiment. I had seen people use sawdust mixed with paint and that they had let dry to be flocking, but I'd never tried painting over sawdust once it was glued down, and I really liked the texture that it gave the piece, so I'm probably going to add that to my list of things that I can use in the future. I put a little bit of static grass down, but then I realized that the static grass was too long and it was out of proportion and really annoying me, so I stopped using it. Just painted over it and added a little bit more sawdust, and then while everything was still wet, I used a toothpick to add in some tracks and some tire lines just to show that there's some work that has been going on at the sawmill. I forgot to age the equipment and it looked way too bright and too clean, so I'm fixing that now. And then I'm adding in all the parts of the diorama to the scene and figuring out where I want them, and then super gluing them in place. I wasn't happy with the size of the base that I made, so I'm cutting it down into a smaller rectangle. I made this tree using the same method I used in the construction site video, which is the first one in this series, so if you want to learn how to make that, I'll link that video at the end of this one and in the description box. The last thing to make were some planks of wood, and I used some coffee stirs that I cut into small strips. These videos are brought to you by viewers like you on my Patreon: Lori, Ryan, Fred, Lisa, Nicole, and Jordan. Thank you so much. These are the mini scholar and mini noble tiers on my Patreon. And here's the finished product. I'm having a lot of fun building this little town for you guys, and I'm super excited for some of the upcoming builds that I have in mind. If you guys want to follow along and get updated whenever new videos come out, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell next to the subscription button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!